Hello, my name is Ji Yu Wong, a professor of supply chain management from Leeds University Business School. My research area is information sharing, integration in supply chains, and also green supply chain. It is my pleasure today to welcome you to the second virtual seminar of Global Food and Environmental Institute. The title of this seminar is Sustainable Food Supply Chain in Cities. What has changed during COVID-19, which will be presented by my colleague, Dr. Eleonora Morganti, Assistant Professor in Urban Food System and Transport at the University of Leeds. The Global Food and Environment Institute, in short GFEI, is an interdisciplinary research community which brings together members from across academia, industry, and public policy to work on the integrated challenges of food security and climate change. If you want to find out more information, you can refer to the chat box where you can find a link to the institute. The seminar is a part of a series of seminars, so please also check the chat box to find out the forthcoming seminar events, and also follow our Twitter. Before I introduce Dr. Morganti, I would like to remind you that the seminar ethic you can see on the screen. Please ensure that your cameras and microphones are switched off during the duration of the seminar. You can use the chat box this to address to everyone questions. At the end of the seminar, which will take about 20 minutes, there will be a 10 minutes Q&A, during which I will help to collect the questions, and Eleonora will be answering questions. May I also remind you that this seminar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available via YouTube later. So now I introduce Dr. Eleonora Morganti, who is currently the Assistant Professor in Urban Food System and Transport at the University of Leeds. She shares work between School of Food Science and the Institute of Transport Studies. Eleonora is a part of the Urban Food Observatory, Global Food and Environmental Institute, and her research focuses on the last mile of food, looking at how sustainable is food transport and distribution in urban areas. So I would like to pass the floor to Eleonora to begin her seminar.
Thanks, G. Thanks for the introduction. I also want to thank Penny and Sarah and all the team at the Global Food and Environment Institute for giving me this opportunity today to share some ideas about what is happening, what happened on the food supply chain. So today, my goal is really to share with you some ideas, some perspective I collected during the last few months about the food supply chain, and in particular to understand what could be the short-term future for our system. And I really look forward to the discussion today because I feel that it's very useful to talk about this and to understand better the different disruption. Next slide, please. So what we discussed today is just at first an overlook of what was the situation before the lockdown, what were our consumption habits. Then we look at the food demand and how we change the way we consume food during this crazy month. And I will give you a more deep focus on what is happening in the supply side. And in particular, I will try to focus on the hospitality sector. Although you will see, I will talk about hospitality, but it's a way to actually talk about the entire supply chain. We start from the last food outlets, but this the disruption really concern all the chain. At the end, the conclusion, I'm going to share some of my thoughts, and I'm actually a little worried. So I hope that discussing with you will open up a more optimistic vision for the coming weeks and months. Next slide, please. So in normal times, so before COVID, between 20 and 30% of food consumption was out of home. So if we consider this is a pretty large amount of food, about one third of the food that we consume was provided by the hospitality sector, like restaurant, takeaways, or pubs. So definitely a distribution that was able to provide a large amount of food. But it has never been, in the past was not the case. We arrived at this situation after many years. Since the late 1970s, consumption of food prepared outside the home has steadily grown from 1/6 to almost 1/3 of an individual's daily dietary intake. So these particular figures refer to the US, but I feel comfortable to say that a very similar situation happened in many European countries. We started to consume out of home more and more, going to a restaurant and pub more and more frequently. Next slide, please. So what happened during the lockdown? Definitely March 2020 has been a huge difference on how we consume food and what kind of food we consume. So the lockdown starts, stay home, self-isolate, and another instruction from the government is to minimize the frequency of food shopping. So that it's a very key point. Either if you are going physically going to a supermarket, or if you are trying to book a slot for home deliveries, it definitely decreases the frequency of opportunities for us to do our groceries. So according to some surveys that have been conducted, there are some elements that we can observe on the food demand changes. Increase of consumption of clean and cured food, staples, and long-lasting produce. Young people became more interested on vegan diets. That is also having an impact on the meat consumption. And then it appears that people were more aware of the role of the diet in preserving their health. So food like ginger, turmeric that help with your immune system became more and more popular. Next slide, please. So, of course, strong decrease of opportunities to eat out of home and increase of at-home consumption. The self-isolation, we understand, had various impacts. So on appetite, on mental and physical health, sleeping patterns, alcohol consumption, these are all being modified during these tough months. And a particular aspect is about snacks. It seems that we have been more keen on buying snacks than consume snacks. And this also has an impact in terms of energy intake, but also fat or saturated fat and sugar, added sugar that were probably not so common in our diet before. There is also a very crucial element that had a huge impact on the food demand, and is the reduced income. We need to take into account that the food insecurity increased by a lot during the last few months, and the number of people that are actually in more vulnerable in terms of food access multiplied by 4 in the UK. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is what happened in terms of food demand, but I would like to try to understand with you what happened in terms of supply, what happened to the hospitality sector in particular, and where did it go? That 20-30%, that 1/3 of food that was provided by the restaurants. Next slide, please. I identified 3 major impacts of this lockdown on the retail, on the hospitality sector. I think that there are more than this, but let's start with this. I believe they give us an already clear look on the scenario. So the first is the increased food waste. The second is the loss of cash flow. And the third is changes in workflow, workforce and employment. Next slide, please. Let's start with the first, is the increase of food waste. So let's be clear here, there has been this huge amount of food that went to the landfill because overnight rules changed and most of the food services had to shut down. There was food in many facilities, in many outlets, and hotels, restaurants were also already stocking for the coming weeks. So all this food, according to most of the trade association, went to the landfill. I want to say that I am aware that this was not the only way of get rid of food. Luckily enough, there were some businesses that managed to donate this food to charities, to different initiatives. But let's keep in mind that a lot of food went to the landfill. Let's give some figures here. So the British Beer and Pub Association estimated that 70 million of pints of beer were being disposed because they would have been good lasting for the month after the lockdown. So besides the economic and, if you want, the social impact of this loss, it's clear that disposing all this alcohol and all this organic food had also an impact on the sustainability and the environmental aspect of the food system. More in general, there are some specific products that faced a huge decrease on sale. We are talking about French fries, sheep cheese, meat, cafe, and etc. There is a long list here. Next slide, please. I give you 1 or 2 examples of what happened in terms of food waste. This is a potato supply chain. So the first closure of restaurants and fast food caused a drastic fall on sale of frozen French fries. Out-of-home consumption were the biggest opportunities for us to consume French fries, mostly because people maybe don't like to fry it at home, or it's easier to indulge in French fries when you are outside. So a huge amount of French fries that were a surplus. In some cases, the players of the supply chain, in this case, most of them were from the Netherlands and from Belgium, but in general, the players have been able to donate some of these potatoes. Some have been destroyed and some have been used as a fertilizer. Keep in mind that the increased demand for fresh potatoes that people were buying during the lockdown didn't compensate the amount of processed French fries that were available. So there hasn't been a balance there. And in fact, as a result, the farmers and the agricultural association estimated with a loss of 400 million in terms of euros. But this doesn't include the added value generated by trade, processing, and the hospitality sector. So this is also another disruption that is all along the supply chain. Next slide, please. Another case is the sheep milk. I was not aware that sheep cheese was mostly consumed out of home. It was the kind of food that we order when we are at restaurants. So the day that pubs, restaurants had to shut down, the decrease demand for this particular product have been huge. In the case of Yorkshire, there were 22 milk processors that suddenly didn't have anybody to who they could sell their product. And only 2 remain open, creating some local customer net and selling door to door. So 2 remain open, but most of them had to shut down. All along the supply chain, this also had an impact at the source, at the farmers. They have to dry off their animals. So in this case, besides losing the profit and reducing their workforce and reducing the opportunity for them to have a profit, it also implies that the day that the demand will get back and we will demand more sheep cheese, well, you will have to take into account the time that farmers will need to set up back the animals to produce milk. Next one, please. So we talk about food waste, and now I would like to talk about the loss of cash flow. This is a very fundamental element for every kind of business. Here, during the summer, we had the scheme Eat Out to Help Out. The British Chamber of Commerce, after conducting a survey to their associated business, said that this scheme, this 500 million pounds spent on helping the hospitality sector, had an impact that was fairly marginal. We have to keep in mind that probably this scheme actually helped the businesses during the summer, but most likely didn't cover the lost sale during the lockdown. We also can observe that there have been other subsidies. This could be more local level or council level. There have been initiatives helping businesses maybe to discount some rents, or even privates that were able to help some businesses. But again, the entire amount of cash flow that was before the lockdown was not somehow compensate, and the customers were not outdoor or outside to spend money. Next one, please. In the case of the loss of cash flow, I think that we should be extremely careful on what is happening to the independent pubs, cafes, and restaurants, because these are the most vulnerable ones. Of course, McDonald's, Wetherspoon are big players that have large financial assets, and they probably will be able to deal with this crisis. I heard that McDonald's was still recruiting until a few weeks ago. What I feel that as a very challenging time is for the small ones, for the medium-sized businesses. And we have some estimation. There is, for example, this statement that says 20,000 hospitality venues across the UK won't be able to get the support from the government because of some bureaucracy issues or even some rules adopted following some previous competition rules. But we really need to set up better schemes and understand how to help these small restaurants that, even if they are trying to shift to some an alternative business like takeaways, well, they will incur in new costs, like creating a new menu or getting an agreement with the delivery company, and also the packaging that will have an impact in terms of environmental and economic cost for the supply chain. This is an example of a little Turkish street vendor in Kirkgate. Is the market in Leeds. They have been able to apply for subsidies from the government. They have been able to get some discounted rent from the municipality of the market, but still, even with all these subsidies, they were not able to pay the 2 salaries that they were having before. It was a family business that was running the food service. Next slide, please. The third impact is the change in the workforce and the employment. So, as you might understand, there are 2 things here. One is the shift in the type of jobs that were needed. Less waiters and probably a shortage of drivers or operators in the warehouses and in the distribution centers. There has been this anecdotal case where, for example, a pilot of British Airways was in furlough because of the stops of the flights, and he got a job as a Tesco driver. This was an example. In some cases, that we were able to create more flexible opportunities for people looking for jobs. But as a general idea, we have to consider that many jobs have been lost, and there will less and less job in the hospitality sector in the coming month. So we're already talking about 290,000 positions that have been lost. Next slide, please. So I'm getting to the end of this presentation. And as I said, I feel that what is happening in the hospitality sector is not limited to that specific industry, but it is clear that is concerning all the players on the food supply chain. Looking at this food waste, the loss of cash flow, and the change in employment, I have to say that I'm really concerned about the resilience of this food supply system. I'm not saying that it is entirely a fault of the system itself, what happened, because I strongly believe that all the parts in the society and the community, even the government, has to set up a better coordination, especially in these emergency moments. I feel that we are at high risk to lose a lot of the variety we actually have been used to see in our cities. There will be less opportunity and less food services, especially independent ones. Income is reduced, employment is struggling. And I think that when I say that I was worried about the system and what is going to happen, I was referring to the coming potential disruption that will be the outcome of Brexit. So I finished my presentation here, and I really look forward to understand what is your perspective on this. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, Eleonora. Right, everyone, you are invited to ask questions, you may use the chat, or you might let me know if you want to ask the question by using your camera. Now, while we are waiting for questions from the participants, I have one question to Eleonora about food insecurity. You mentioned about food insecurity. There could be people who can afford but not able to access to food, but there also will be people who cannot afford to access to food. Is there any other information or research you've done in this area that you can share with us?
Yes, so as you may be aware, the food banks have been very popular over the last few months. There has been a webinar yesterday on childhood food poverty. There were some very interesting observations. We have all these issues related to children entitled to free meals that during the lockdown had very limited access to this food, to these meals, and we know that this is a huge problem, and we know that these have repercussions, especially for kids and young adults, in order to even have good be able to focus at school or be able to grow healthy. So the aspect of even considering the insecurity quadrupled over from March to now until now is a very worrying data, and I'm not sure what are the options besides create more strong and more effective governmental subsidies.
I think that brings us to the next question by Carrie Bradshaw, who asking you to explain what you meant by stronger intervention from governments. Do you have something more specific in mind?
Yeah, I mean, what did we do when the banks were struggling in 2007? We just feed with them a lot of money and they survived. In this case, it's another kind of industry, and it's another system. But I feel that either we help, it's probably a double aspect. We need to help businesses and at the same time to help households. So I'm keen on promoting policies that will help both businesses, but also probably consider some universal income for people in a more broad and crucial way.
Yeah, I have another question from Janice about food waste. So Janice pointed out that in Ireland, food that was not going to be used in will be given to local charity, such as homeless sector. Is it something that is commonly also practiced in England?
Yes, I've been aware. There are cities like Liverpool, but also Leeds, or I mean, all over the UK, we can identify many examples of pubs or restaurants or cafes that were able to set up temporary links with local charities or even with homeless structure, able to give some amount of their food in order to avoid the landfill. It's hard to quantify how much of the food has been actually saved from landfill. According to the statements that the Trade Association gave, it was not such a large amount. Also, when we donate food, we always have to consider safety, hygiene, and other procedures that somehow have a limitation on the amount of food that you can donate. So hopefully it's more than what we think that the food has been donated, but definitely not all.
Yeah, we have several questions went back to about small businesses. How can we, see their recovery? Tony Whiting asked a question. He said it's very tough on existing small businesses. Many fail under a mountain of debt. But there always seems to be plenty of new businesses ready to spring up when things improve. Do we see any new businesses springing up?
It's true. It's true. I saw there are some of new businesses. An Italian delicacy just opened last week. I don't know. I feel that the system has some inertia, so maybe some of these business plan to open before the lockdown, and so they didn't lose an enormous amount of money because they were not open or yet. This could be some energy that was still in the system that is available now. I don't know. I feel that is still more the number of businesses that are closing down or will close compared to the amount of the number of businesses that will open in the coming months.
Yeah, I think Kerry came back to ask the questions. Her question about intervention was more about fiscal intervention. Perhaps what the government given now to the hospitality sector is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, definitely fiscal intervention are a big help. That is definitely a good intervention. There were some opportunity for state aid or that have been already agreed, and there will be more coming. Hopefully the cap that were in place before will be reduced, will be increased, so you can give even more money. But there are some issues here that are also related to loans. So banks are encouraged by government to give more money and open up their cash. But in practice, this is not really happening. Many businesses are actually complaining that the banks have been tough. So what can we do here? Maybe there is a way where the government can clearly give direction to banks.
Yeah, given the limit of time we have, I just go on to the next, just one last question by Edgem. The question is, what do you think is the role of public-private partnership to pivot supply chains? And what do you see emerging in the food supply chain?
Well, public and private partnership have a big role. We still are a little bit under the rationale of making profit. So I feel that there should be more in this specific extraordinary times. We should put apart the profit target that we have and being able to conduct and to enlarge public-private partnership that somehow they can help getting some more opportunities in the food supply chain.
Okay. Now, I'm concerned that we have now run out of time. We still have a few more other questions coming in, and I think Eleonora is going to look at these questions and perhaps get back to individuals after this. I'd like to really thank everyone attending this seminar and thank Eleonora to give us the time. and interesting presentations, thought-provoking, mentioned by some of these attendees. And also for everyone, please look out at the event link to find out more further presentations and seminars in the future. And also, find out more about Global Food and Environmental Institute here in Leeds. And we're looking forward to further continue working with all of you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.